Well, good morning. I'm down at the packing bench, and I talk about something I noticed this week. Even though Rose has been doing most of my packing while I recover from my wrist surgery, the quantity of book sales is up. Books, of course, are part of the greater media category that includes all sorts of things. And how you define media really depends on whether you're talking about Postage, eBay's categories, or your own experience. But these days, as I've slowed down a bit, I've turned my attention back to books. The quantity of book sales is up. And I think it's because we're now into November and people are turning their attention to inside projects. So whether it's cookbooks like this low print run with a spiral binding, or craft books like this one, or even religious books like this one, this copy of the Quran. And yeah, I sell both Qurans and Bibles, all forms, non-denominational in that sense. Books are an interesting topic, especially for the beginner. If you're just starting to sell on eBay and you're looking around for items to learn with, most of us of a certain age, and baby boomers are probably the largest demographic out there, most of us, especially baby boomers, are still readers of books, of physical books. I've never really shifted over into reading on my screens. It fatigues my eyes. The size of my smartphone, the screen is so small, it makes it hard for me to read. And there's just something about being able to cuddle up on a cold day with a book. Maybe some hot coffee, put some music on in the background, and read. No, I've been that way since I was a kid. I always had something either in my backpack or my school locker, in a bicycle pouch, or later in my car. I read a wide gamut of everything from sci-fi to cosmopolitan magazines to find out what was going on in the world outside my small village where I grew up in, because it gave me a chance to get away from the small area I was in and go anywhere. The big city, the moon, under the ocean. Yeah, so I was always a reader. Though I have not always been a seller of books. When Rose and I used to clear storage units and estates, we'd generally find that the books just were too voluminous. There were just too many of them to sift through them in careful detail and find those that were worth putting up on eBay. Instead, I tended to bulk them up and pass them on either to my son-in-law, who was a bookseller, or just simply out to local auctions or charities to make the books go away. Occasionally, if a particular book caught my eye, maybe it was a book on machine tooling or house construction, because we were building in those days, I would hold on to it and peruse it. When we moved out of Seebeck, my entire library of building books had to be cleared and surplused. But these days, as I've slowed down a bit, I've turned my attention back to books. They are heavy in volume, but they're easy and they're simple. They require a little more detail in the way of listing and deciding on condition, but individual books and small book sets, they're an easy if you're just starting in this game. Now, if you're a seasoned seller, you know that books are plentiful. Many people don't think they have a future, so they're not valued at a lot of estates and auctions. And if you are careful about what you pick up, you can make good money, a good return on books. They do take a lot of space to store, but packing them is relatively straightforward. They're rarely able to be damaged in shipment. Now, the exception today will be this type of book. It has that plastic spine, and as these age, that spine is a little bit fragile. So when I do ship a book like this, I tend to give it a little more protection. I'll thicken something like a piece of foam. Let's see if I have one. I'll take a full-size sheet of foam, and I'll actually put something on the front and the back to thicken up the binding, and then put bubble around it. That way, this is not the thickest thing in the package and going to get broken so easily if something hard or heavy is put on top of it. But other than that, I tend to pack books in pretty much the same way. There are some factors involved, though. Cost, the value of the book, available packing material, how far the book's going. If it's going overseas, I might give it a little more care. And whether or not it's a single book, a group of books, or a set. Because the larger masses I will put in boxes. We shipped one out yesterday. It wasn't actually a book. It was part of the greater media. It was a set of cassettes. Tony Robbins, I think it's Tony Robbins' personal development cassettes. And there was a whole group of them. We just dropped the whole thing into a box, and I think I've got some footage or photos of that, and I'll show it to you. But in general, I tend to wrap them with something. If it's a $5 sci-fi vintage book, I'll drop it in a piece of bubble, put it in a mailer, and away it goes. If I think it needs a little cardboard stiffener, I tend to go all the way around them, or I will use corrugated cardboard. And I have this type of corrugated cardboard in rolls that are 18 inches wide. This is a scrap cut off from a book, and I'll use this to pack a piece of jewelry or something small. But I tend to wrap this all the way around the book, pinch in the ends like a Christmas present, and then I don't even bother to put it in a padded mailer. I simply put it in a clear, thin poly mailer, because this has provided the protection, and the poly mailers, either type, provide the waterproofing. Because I live in the Pacific Northwest, I give a lot of thought to whether my package will be left on someone's porch in the snow or the rain and get damaged, because that is one thing about books. They're susceptible to moisture. That's both in storage and in transit. So I tend to make sure one of the layers is weather resistant. Either a bag, if I've dropped it in a bag, or in a poly, or in a padded bubble. But I like to include a weatherproof layer as well. We'll start by putting these in a clear bag like I use for t-shirts. Because they're white books, I want them to stay clean. Then we're going to wrap them in the corrugated and slide them into a poly mailer. It's raining out today, and that reminds me, poly mailers sealed tight with tape do a pretty good job of keeping the weather off of books. All right, once I've done the tucks at the corner, I just simply fold it down over the edge of the book, using the book itself as the fold mark. Then I fold this one up, a little harder to do one-handed, and I put some tape across, about 3 spots on a book this size, flip it around, do the other end, and she's ready to go in the mailer. All right, here you can see the end product. Here's the tuck, there's the fold over, there's the tape. I think it presents very, very well, better than bubble. And because this is larger than my largest padded bubble mailer that I keep in stock, I simply slip these bigger books into a regular simple poly mailer. This provides the waterproofing, this provides the protection, and it's not the only way to do it, it's just the way I found to do it quickly. Other people like to wrap them in stiff cardboard scraps. But since I paid very, very little for these, and a roll lasts a long time, this is the method I've settled on. All right, let me slide it into this mailer, get her taped up, and go on to the next book. And then it's simply a question of watching how I want to ship them. The last few years, I've noticed that, especially under the Postmaster DeJoy, the cost of media rate shipping, which is a special category of shipping, has climbed. And often for books at £1 or $2, the cost difference between sending a book ground advantage and sending it media is pennies. Now here is that spiral bound cookbook. By the time I padded it, it weighed 12 ounces. It's going to New York though, and that's where the challenge is. To New York, 447 media, ground advantage, which is the next line down, $6.37. So that's almost nearly $2 difference, because it's going cross country. If it had been staying within Washington or going to Oregon or Idaho, I'd have probably been able to upgrade that. But it doesn't always happen. But you have to give that some thought as you're creating the listing. So I always keep an eye on the shipping label page, and even though I put most books up as media rate when I do the listing, I sometimes ship them out at the ground advantage rate. And I do that for a couple reasons. One is they're insured. You can add insurance to media rate, but you pay extra, and that really takes it up close to the cost of ground advantage. And as I was saying, the note right here says your package is not fully covered. So you can add damage or loss to the value of $11.79 by clicking here. But it would cost you $1.70 to protect $11.79. That's pretty steep rates. So when I do send something media, the books tend to be on the lower end, say $20 or less, and I don't insurance shipping. If it's an expensive book, $50, $60, $100 for a set of books, or even a single, then I normally am not going to ship it media in the first place. But you could check the rates if it was heavy and say media plus insurance versus ground advantage, and let the shipping cost, actually make the determination for you. I would simply protect a book worth $120 a lot better than I might protect a book worth $12. But for heavier, larger books, book sets, book groups, I almost always ship them media. And these days, I don't think it's that much slower than ground advantage, which was the other point that was always made. If you needed to get there faster, don't ship it media, especially during Q4. But if those are your terms on your listing in eBay, those are the terms. And as long as you meet your terms and commitment requirements, I don't see a problem with sending things media. I pay a little more attention to it near Q4, because if everyone else, say you've got a popular book, we'll say a Harry Potter group, and everyone else has put theirs up at ground advantage, and you think you're saving $1, maybe $2 by putting it up media, you may want to rethink that, because yours is less likely to sell, because books at the holidays are often being bought as gifts, and people want to get those in their possession quickly. So just make your listings competitive. If everybody else is selling it with ground advantage shipping, consider it. If everybody else is selling it with media, yours might stand out if you pick ground advantage. And some of that goes right back to where you live. If you live in the center of the country, say you're in Kansas City, Missouri, your shipping is going to be different for ground advantage than if I'm in west of Seattle and I'm shipping to the East Coast often, which I do. So my ground advantage label is going to be more expensive to get anywhere on the East Coast than, say, someone sitting in the middle of the country. So you have to evaluate for your individual situation and decide which is better for you and your business. All right, so back to books. Books, of course, are part of the greater media category that includes all sorts of things. And how you define media really depends on whether you're talking about Postage, eBay's categories, or your own experience. For instance, I consider video educational games to be media, but many of them don't qualify for media rate shipping. Unless it's so educational that it falls under the exceptions into the media rules. And like everything else the federal government does, there's an entire section on what is or isn't allowed to be sent media. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a couple things about selling media and media mail. It is probably the most abused rate the USPS system offers. And the post office knows this. Some sellers, some shippers, will ship just about anything and try to package it with a label that says media mail. Other people will ship something like software that does not qualify, but because they figure it's close to something that does, like a DVD, they will give it a try. And the post office, knowing this, probably scrutinizes media mail more than most things. They probably open more media mail packages to see what's inside them than most other things. Now, the media program goes way back into the post-war years, World War II, and electrification, and getting books out to rural kids to read. That's why it was set up as a cheap rate to begin with. They wanted to get teaching materials out to teachers in the country, and they wanted to get books out to educate the children of America. So they created it. And of course, it's been used for many, many things since then. The technology has changed. A book on tape, audio, cassette, CD, some sort of disc media. If it's a book and it's for education or for reading, it probably qualifies for media. But there are enough exceptions to say that it is not media to make note of. For instance, magazines with advertising. Doesn't matter how old the magazine is. It can be from the 1920s. But if it's got advertising in it, doesn't count as media. You've got to send it something else, ground advantage or priority. But just because it's called a magazine doesn't make it exempt from media rate. For instance, when we were younger and Rose used to give out subscriptions to our nieces and nephews for a magazine called Highlights, which was a kids' educational craft magazine activity book, those didn't have advertising. So those could go media rate. In fact, they were designed to send that. They'd send them out to the school kids. So there are magazines, if they don't have advertising, that can qualify. Here's an example. If you have a Penthouse magazine, it's got advertising, doesn't qualify for media. You can sell it on eBay, but it's got to go ground advantage. But if you have a special edition Penthouse and it has no advertising in it, then it falls back into the media category. It's the same way with anime, manga, and comics. Comics, not media, right? Too much advertising. Graphic novels often can go media rate because they're books. They're books with comic drawings, but they're still books. So if you're going to get into the niche and you're going to kind of run around the periphery, you'll need to spend a little time deciding whether the product you want to stock and sell is or isn't media rate. Other examples, reel-to-reel tapes. If they've got music on them, media. If they're blank, not media. VHS tapes, the same way, cassette tapes. If it's new and sealed and blank, it can't go media. If it's full of something like audio music, media. Records, same way. What else have we got running around the edge? An interesting one I run to is that if you take a book and it's an old vintage book and it's full of those wonderful drawn art prints of flowers or scenes, it's a book. It can go media. But once you start slicing out the pages to sell the individual prints inside the book, it stops becoming media. Because one of the other little rules says, I think it's got to be 8 pages long. So if what you've got looks like a booklet or an instruction booklet, and it's not 8 pages, doesn't qualify as media. So if you're going to sell instruction books, user's manuals, that type of thing, you're going to want to learn the rules. All right, now software. Generally, software is not media rate. But if it's educational software, you might be able to say, yes, it is because it qualifies under the educational requirements. That's why people can send the giant pull-down charts and things that were set up in classrooms 30, 40 years ago, because they were instructional material. And in my 20-odd years of selling and using the post office to ship things, I've noticed a few things. Back when I first started and I lived really close to my local post office, I would go up to the counter. And sometimes I would actually carry the packaging and the item loose, and I'd ask them at the counter, does this qualify for media mail? And if you asked several different postal employees the same question, you could get a different answer. Because some of them stick to like this screen here that gives you just a quick overview of what does qualify, or right here you can see it. Computer readable media. But that doesn't include software. Medical loose leaf pages and binders. All right. But if we go a little further and we click down here that says media mail eligibility, we get an entire section on media mail, much more detail. Here are content standards. This is where some of those fine lines get interpreted by people, because deciding if something does or doesn't count as media mail can be interpretive. The rules are there, but how you interpret them. Because here's one, for instance, printed educational reference charts designed to instruct or train for developing their capabilities. And you used to get these school diagrams. They were like roller shades. Each one only held one chart, but they could be 4 feet wide. They could be 3 inches around. Well, most people interpret that to mean they qualify as media, but it is so far from being a book. You get different people interpreting it differently at the counter. Now, what I used to do in these situations is I'd talk to my local postmistress, and she'd break out the binder. It was a 3-ring binder in those days, and we'd look it up together and make a decision. But these days, I don't use the counter at the post office, so I pretty much go by my experience. And here are enclosures in books and sound recordings, because sometimes they will allow scholastic books like Highlights Magazine. Inside each one would be an order form to order another subscription, and they would allow those. It wasn't considered as advertising as we know it. So here you go. In addition to the enclosures and editions listed above, any printed matter that is mailable, marketing mail, may be included. So there are some rules about being able to put additional things in. An invoice can be placed inside. So see, you're allowed to put in a few little things in with your media mail, and that does not disqualify it. People have asked in the past whether putting your business card in is actually enough to say no. Well, I guess that technically, if you wanted to follow these rules, instead of a business card, you should print something that looks like an invoice that can then lead your buyer to your off-site website or some place where they can order directly from you. But anyway, media is an interesting thing. But if they challenge it, you're likely going to have to, at a minimum, pay the upcharge to Ground Advantage or Priority, and there's always the potential of a fine for misusing the system. Media mail can be a great way to expand what you can ship and in categories that you want to move into, because it's all about keeping your shipping costs down and your profits up. And every once in a while the rules change. Generally they simply keep increasing the price, and that's the only change they do. But over time, the rules do change because they're amended as technology comes along. Media. Media is a great category, especially for the beginner. Just take a look at the shipping rules, because you can think of it as media, you can list it as media, but depending on where you list it inside the eBay platform, come shipping day, eBay may lock out that category. And I run into that sometimes with supporting manuals for equipment. If I've got a boat motor manual and I want to put it in a category with the boat motors that it supports, it'll let you list it, but come shipping day, it may say media, this category is not eligible for media rate. And if you figured on shipping it media and the book's 2 inches thick, weighs 5 pounds, you're going to take a loss on the shipping side. So you've got to learn those little ins and outs about media. But I'm going to go ahead and pack this little blue cookbook. But yeah, we've noticed a real uptick in books. When Rose was packing yesterday, I think 3/4 of the items going out were books, which plays into the curbside pickup. Remember, books alone, media alone, does not qualify for the post office to pick up curbside and get your packages and take them away. You've got to have at least one package that's something else. Ground Advantage, Priority, Overnight. Because if all you have are standard envelopes, eBay standard envelopes, and media, it's not going to work. In that situation, and I've had that situation from time to time, I take a look when I'm packing and I say, what's the smallest book headed for the closest destination? Because remember, media rate, 1 pound is your first cutoff, and anywhere in the country. So 1 pound anywhere in the country is the same price. Ground Advantage, though, has increments, and you pay by length of the trip, by destination travel. So what I do is I look at all my books and I say, that one's only going to Oregon, 1 state over. That one only weighs 8, 9, 10 ounces. So if I pack that one and I upgrade that one to Ground Advantage, now all the rest of the books qualify curbside. So yeah, those are the little ins and outs, because if I have to drive the town and back just because I've sold books alone, I've lost the time and I've lost the fuel. So I'd rather spend the money, upgrade that one little book, qualify for Curbside, and then let them pick up all the rest of the media while they're here. That works. But this is Brian. We're at the lake. Cabin Fever. All right, here's the other book. This one was mine. Seebeck, of course, is the town we used to live in. Title of the book is Tides Out, Table Set, because the bay would empty at high and low tide there by the marina, which we've got another video that shows a road trip to Seebeck to pick up some auction lots. In it, I show you a bit of the marina area and where we lived. This is a hardcover dust jacket, illustrated. It's an ex-library. You can see by the tags here, I think I picked this up at a Friends of the Library sale, but it gives all the information. There's the old marina, and it really is an interesting book. But it's one of those low runoff, mostly for history buffs and for local museums, that type of thing. But it gives you the history of Seebeck. It was published in 1993. And there's the school it used to be part of. I had it for many years. I'd use it as a reference. It sat on my coffee table, which is one of the reasons it's a little bit faded. But you can also see it had the heavy library dust jacket. And when a book has the library dust jacket like that, I put it in the features, because personally I consider that somebody put that extra work into making the cover and the dust jacket wear longer. That's a positive, so I make sure I highlight it. It'll get packed the same way as the book I just showed you, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but it is going back to Seebeck. That was another interesting aspect. I'm shipping it about an hour north, going back to Seebeck. I didn't recognize the name of the buyer, though. All right, that's the Seebeck book. Tides Out. It's on its way back to Seebeck. Media rate. Yeah, interesting thing about media rate, even though it's only going an hour north and the other one's going to Connecticut, once you set the poundage, this is 3 pounds, the other was 4, the rate's the same. Per pound, it doesn't differ. I can send it across the county. I can send it across the country.